Welcome to MasterTools videos. In this video, Vendors 1, we'll look at the vendor, contacts, and comment screens of the vendor master record to see how to add a new vendor. Let's get started. Vendors are found in Accounts Payable, Vendors. Select the Add icon and tab through the Vendor ID field if your vendors are being automatically numbered. If not, enter your vendor ID and then tab to the Name field. Enter the vendor name, then tab to the sort name. Change the sort name only if you wish your vendor to be sorted in reports differently than the official vendor name, such as dropping the or putting the last name first if the customer is an individual. Next, enter the address fields, then tab through city and state to the zip field. When you enter the zip code, the system will automatically complete the city and state fields. If this is a U.S. address, tab through the country field. When you do so, the information you entered under the vendor section will default into the payee section. Change the payee information if the information on the check differs from the vendor information, such as when checks are mailed to a post office box address. The phone number 1, phone number 2, fax, and reference fields are optional. In the reference field is where you can enter the vendor's account number for you. Status is active. Type is permanent. Miscellaneous is only used for the miscellaneous vendor, which has already been set up for you. If this vendor is a supplier of inventory, type in the GL table ID of supplier or look it up and select it. If it is a vendor that provides general and administrative services, then search by selecting the spyglass, then the OK. Find the GL table that corresponds to the expense account you wish to use. If you enter values for ship via, freight terms, and FOB, these values will be pulled into the purchase order each time one is created for this vendor. These are not required fields. If you will not be issuing a 1099 for this vendor, set 1099 to no. The value of this 1099 status defaults into vouchers entered for this vendor. Vouchers are what MasterTools calls vendor invoices or bills. On each voucher, you can change the 1099 status depending on whether the voucher should be included in the 1099 amount for that vendor. To have a warning appear each time you create a voucher to remind you to set the correct 1099 status, set this to yes and issue warning. If this is a 1099 vendor and you do not want a warning, set the value to yes. For 1099 vendors, enter either their Social Security number or their EIN number in the Federal ID field. If this vendor does not use US dollars, contact MasterTools support for additional training on using foreign currency. When entering vouchers for this vendor, if you want to require that an invoice number be entered, set this value to either require allow duplicates or require do not allow duplicates. If you do not require vendor invoice numbers on the voucher, select either Not Required Allow Duplicates or Not Required Do Not Allow Duplicates. If you wish for purchase orders for this vendor to be shipped complete, mark the Ship Complete box. Payment status can be set to active or hold if you do not want to release checks to this vendor, or separate if you need multiple vouchers to be paid on separate checks rather than combined. Enter the terms, then the date code. MasterTools has both a due date and a pay date on vouchers. The date code parameter here determines how the pay date is calculated. If, for example, the terms are 210 net 30, setting the date code value to pay by discount date would calculate a pay date in 10 days. Setting the payment status to pay by due date would give you a pay date in 30 days. The balance value is automatically calculated by the system when there is activity on this vendor. The More button contains parameters for setting buying objectives, associating a vendor to sales tax payments or EDI partners, and for setting up the vendor to receive ACH payments. If you wish to use any of this functionality, contact MasterTools support for an in-depth explanation. Selecting the Require Vendor Invoice Approval means that each voucher for this vendor must have an approval status of approved in order to be paid. Note that in the More button, you can see the date the vendor was established, as well as the date, amount, and check number of the last check written to them. Returning to the main screen, The buttons Attachment, Attributes, Format Overrides, Special Instructions, and Vendor Items are explained in the Vendors 3 video. Now let's move to the contact screen. Here you will list your contacts with this vendor. You must first enter a contact ID. For example, a value of PO would indicate this is someone to whom you send purchase orders. Next, enter the contact's name. The phone, extension, fax, and address fields across the line only need to be filled in if they are different from what is on the first screen. So after entering the name, you may only need to complete the cell, position, and email address fields. Just enter the information you desire. None of it is required. The amounts and open item screens only apply once the vendor has been added and there is activity. We will look at these in the Vendors 2 video, which includes the amounts, open items, and EDI screens. The final screen you may wish to add information on is the comment screen. If desired, enter a comment for this vendor. As additional comments are added, the system displays them in reverse order so that the most recent one is at the top. Once you have entered all the information you wish to record for this vendor, add the vendor by selecting the OK button with your mouse or by pressing the Enter key. Well, that wraps up our instructions on the vendor, contacts, and comment screens. We recommend that you follow this video by watching the Vendors 2 video, which shows how to view transactions and history on a vendor using the amounts and open item screens. For instructions on using the attachment, attributes, format overrides, special instructions, and vendor items button on the vendor, watch Vendors 3. Thanks for watching.